What's going on, everybody? This is Brett0331, and we got a very small live stream tonight. We've only got, as of right now, I've only got one guest in here, but I got a second guest who will be in here very shortly. So, no stranger. We got Les, Pegasus Test, old reliable, although he wasn't here last week.
I had a good excuse.
Yeah, you had an alibi, so we give you another shot at the string of fire. So. And we do have Stoker Maddock joining us here in a minute. I guess he had to go use the head call or something. But hey, guys, literally, I got no topic tonight. Just up for grabs. So anything anybody wants to throw in the chat, by all means, throw it in there. I'm even up for the possibility of maybe even allowing you guys, some of you, to jump in the stream tonight. Randall with Grunt Proof did that on a stream he had. I think it was last week, and it was pretty funny watching just random dudes jump in his stream and join the conversation. So that was pretty cool. I thought that was interesting, and we might do that tonight as well. So, but nonetheless, let's while we're waiting for Stoker to jump in, Les, man, you just came back from overseas doing some competition stuff. So you want to fill us in what you've been up to?
Yeah, I was over there in Finland at Finnish Brutality. Awesome event, best brutality I've been to. Yari talked me into, i.e. voluntold me I was in the breacher division. So over there they have a division called Armored/TST. I cannot pronounce the Finnish word that TST is an abbreviation for, but basically you wear all your field gear. So I took that opportunity to wear my patrol rig, did all 10 stages, and then I did also 10 breacher stages, which we had a series after doing the main shooting match. We had a series of stages. We had tasks we had to do, like dig a foxhole in 10 minutes. How many push-ups can you do in 5 minutes? How many Finnish paratrooper burpees you can do in 3 minutes? Breaching doors with sledgehammers, all that stuff. It was like crazy insane, and we had an absolute blast.
That's awesome. And just before we get back into this conversation, let's welcome in Stoker Maddock. Welcome to the chat.
Oh yeah.
So we're just treading water right now for a second until something comes by. But Les is filling us in. He was over in Finland doing some competition shooting, which I might add, we had that stream about whether competition shooting was good training for combat. It was funny watching some of the comments about people kind of shitting on the type of competition shooting you do, Les. And these were people that were defending competition shooting or like 3-gun stuff. I don't know. I watched that stream probably 2 or 3 times after the fact, after we got done. And I'm like, these people that are posting all mad at us about this, like, I don't understand why they're mad. I was like, every single one of us said that competition shooting makes you a better shooter and it was beneficial, right? Every single person said that. But because some of us in the group were like, well, yeah, it makes you a better shooter, but there's a possibility of, maybe developing some potential bad habits because when you're doing the competition shooting, you're doing it for speed, right? You're not necessarily utilizing cover. You're kind of exposing yourself to get the better shot and the quickest shot, right? So the consensus of the panel was like, yeah, it's absolutely great training, makes you a better shooter. But there is a possibility you might develop some training scars from that. And that was it. That was kind of a summary of the stream. And like, man, dudes were coming out of the woodwork like shitting on us for this. And then Les replied to one of the guys and he was like, hey man, I do this competition shooting all the time. And then what did he say, Les? He like totally wrote you off. Like you're not a serious competition shooter.
Oh yeah. All because I made the phrases that sometimes, given the stage and the presentation that we get, that I'll sacrifice my score to go get training value out of it. And the guy just like shit himself over that, which he's entitled to. The cool thing is this kind of sent me down a rabbit hole, and I got a video I'm working on. I'll probably put it out in a week or two, where I got to interview some of the top competitors out there. I did an interview with Carl Cassata, the inventor of brutality. I did an interview with Russ Fagan, Sinistral Rifleman, wins about 1 zillion competitions a month. I interviewed Michael Sheelan, the top IPSC rifle shooter in Sweden. Interviewed Ziga Polinar, who, wow, man, I could have made that a 2-hour interview in and of itself. He's got some really good opinions on the subject. And I also got Jari Laine, the CEO of Varusteleka, who is a Finnish recon commando. and is the designer of Finnish brutality, and got some great insights on how competition is actually good for your training paradigm.
Yeah, no doubt. Just on that same, topic, just a basic rifle qualification course is essentially a competition, right? And you're either feeding in good habits or you're feeding in bad habits, but you can't think that, if you're on a KD course, that what you're going to do there on that KD course is going to be applicable. And nobody thinks that. If I go to, when I shot at a Bill Rogers firing course, it's very similar. You're in a static position and there's a lot of stuff happening, but I mean, it's not, it's all, it's all good stuff, but.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. And Mike, welcome.
Yeah.
Hey,
I didn't even think you were going to jump on tonight, but welcome aboard.
I didn't think I was either, but I had an opening, so I took it.
Nice. Well, appreciate you. So
glad to see you here, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So just talking about the KD course, like the Marine Corps did that for years. We just changed it up. It's a lot different now. It's still fundamentally similar, but they made it more combat oriented, right? Incorporated different strings of fire that, were utilized cover and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, for the vast majority of my Marine Corps career, I shot no distance course, right?
Yeah.
And you're going from 2, 3, and 500 freaking yard lines. And I remember in combat in the Najaf Cemetery engaging a target that was at least about 500 yards out, right? And I was using iron sights.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt absolutely comfortable engaging those targets. And to me, it was beneficial shooting that KD course. It's like you see firsthand what 500 yards looks like, right? Like, and you visualize it. You're used to it. You're shooting that rifle qualification fire essentially yearly, right? And you know, and it's ingrained in your head, like how far 500 yards is. And, obviously we use the football field method at that time too, but like getting the practical application of shooting from the 3 and the 5, like you get that mental image in your head of how far those distances are. So when you're in combat, and you see that enemy and you can visualize, what they look like at that distance. It was absolutely, in my mind, that was absolutely a good thing.
Yeah, and not to mention just knowing how to and having the confidence to manipulate your weapon, right? To manipulate your sights,
Yeah.
And you're never going to do that unless you can engage out at those distances time and time again and become an expert.
I've got a question. I've got a question for you guys because I know all of you are, iron sight era, right? I was watching this interview with Eugene Stoner, and they were talking about the A2 and how the A2, had a windage adjustment knob. And he was talking about how, soldiers in combat have a tendency of, messing with their windage knobs. And I'm like, I never did that. And thought wouldn't even cross my mind. In fact, even if that was a thing, like I remember when we BZO'd our iron sights, like we would take a pen, a grease pen, and like mark where our zero was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that in the event that jumping off the track in the middle of the night, somehow it rose up against your gear and your windage is off. Like you see that. Yeah, that mark is off. So anyways,
that's a common misperception out there. And when I was over in Finland, not this year, but last year, everybody was convinced that was a problem. And I was like the sole defender of the M16A2. I had Ian, the bloke, and in range ganging up on me saying, no, that was the biggest mistake going from A1 to A2 is putting those sights on it. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Those sights are awesome. And nobody messes with your sights. Nobody sits there and comes and turns your dials or anything like that. I never encountered that. And my whole time in the Marine Corps, my sights on my A2 never changed.
Yeah, I really like the elevation adjustment on the A2. I think that is amazing. The windage adjustment, I just never, I said it once and forget it. It is easy to access, which, I can see there being like, you never use it. You never even look at it again. And like, if it gets bumped, then you're like, well, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know where it is. So I can see that as a criticism, but the elevation adjustment is amazing on the A2.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to admit, like, I'm biased, right? Because I used an A2 in combat, and like, to me, it got me there and back, right? And, but I just don't understand like why. And I get the argument about the A1, like, oh, it's simple. And I wish Doc Larson was in here because, he's a big A1 guy. And, A1's simple, and I get it. Most engagements happen at 300 or in. But I mean, there are those situations where you're at 500, right? And I think like sitting in a fighting position, and let's say, there's vast openness between me and let's say a tree line, and it's 500 yards away. Like, why wouldn't I set my rear sight aperture to the 500?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't you? Like, it makes perfect sense. So
takes all the guesswork out.
Right.
So. Yeah, honestly, like just trying to hold over at 500, it makes a lot more sense to just, like you're saying, turn the dials to the likely distance you're gonna encounter the enemy, and if they need to be put down closer, well, it's especially if you train it on the KD range, you're gonna spin the dial to where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now let me just preface this, like, I'm absolutely reminiscing right now. Like, I'm all about freaking optics. Specifically, like ACOGs or like a low power variable that has bullet drop compensation. Like, I think that's the way to go. I'm just saying that I used iron sights at one point in my lifetime, and they got me there and back. And I will add that if you watch a lot of these Ukraine combat videos, like, there's a metric fuck ton of iron sights being employed over there.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like, I'm all about optics, and using technology to, advance what you got. But, nobody should feel like they're being limited because they're using iron sights, or they should hold off on doing something because the weapon platform that they have has iron sights. Like, it's no big deal. And it's like not going to the gym because you can't lift fucking 500 pounds. Like, go to the gym. Like, no big deal.
Yeah, iron sights are amazing in the fact that if you consider Simo Haya, the sniper with the most recorded kills in the Winter War, over 500, did it with an iron sight Mosin and an iron sighted Suomi submachine gun.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know how to use them, they're not a limiting factor.
Yeah.
Especially if you read some of the early battles of 1914 in the First World War. The British were all about setting their sights. Their officers would call out the range. The NCOs would tell the troops to adjust their sights, and then they would volley fire. And they had devastating effect on the Germans. That's where the German conception of the British having more machine guns than they had came from, because they could rapid fire and accurately hit with their Lee Enfields at extended range.
Mm-hmm.
I got to point this out. So Chris Reed just commented this: M27 greater than M16 and 4. I said what I said. All right. So Chris has gone to One Shepherd, so we know who he is, and he just graduated from recruit training and is in the School of Infantry right now. Chris, Stoker, Les, and I have more airtime jumping out of the back of a freaking truck in the Marine Corps than you currently do. So I don't want to hear any opinions of you, buddy.
Yep.
Now, optics are the way. Like, to use Finnish brutality as an example, when I was over there, could I have done that whole competition iron sights? Absolutely. But did it with technically a green dot, not a red dot. But a lot of times I was using my magnifier because the targets, one of the rules they have there is they don't paint them between stages. So the more they get impacted, the more they blend in with the terrain. And optics made finding the target essential. And if you can find it, you can hit it. But, I was able to make hits sometimes because I had that green dot and magnifier combo that I just would have made them with iron sights. It would just take me longer to get done.
Yeah, and that's been my experience to the T. It's if I know where the target is, iron sights are just as good. I can get just as good at groups, put bullets where they need to go, just as effectively as magnified optics. However, magnified optics helps you find where the enemy is, find what you need to be putting bullets into. That's where I think they really shine.
Yeah, no doubt.
100% agreed.
Answer that other one, Marine Corps and Army. Thank you very much. The one thing that I've really been chewing the fat on when it comes to weapon systems is, especially with the terrain and elevation that I've had to deal with, elevation doesn't matter too much, between the Pacific Northwest and up here in northern Georgia, is there is almost zero chance of engaging a target, let alone identifying a target, beyond 100 meters, except if you might be close to a open prairie, right? And that really got me really thinking about, because I used to be all about, I want to engage 500 meters and beyond. It was just always my driving thing. I wanted to stay in my bubble, so to speak, right? And really work and hone my skills. And of course I still do, but the more I really started thinking about this realistically, like, I'll never take a shot beyond 300 meters. And even that is almost too far for where I'm at around here. So it's interesting though, because when you look at a lot of the hoopla that's out there about, using systems that are really designed to engage from that 300 meters and beyond, there's just not a whole lot of opportunity unless maybe, in an urban environment. But even then you have to be firing down a long axis of a linear danger area. So I don't know, just something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, that kind of matches some of my experience in Missouri. Is the opportunity to engage at distances greater than 100 meters. Like most engagements I find myself in, simulated engagements, I should say, is about 50 meters. However, that being said, I have had a few opportunities where that capability to engage targets at 300 and 400 meters really created kind of like an overmatch capability for the enemy. So when when the stars aligned, where I was able to employ that, it had a devastating effect on the opposing force.
Well, I think you hold the record for the longest miles force on force shot at one Shepherd, don't you, Mike?
Maybe. I know other guys have made pretty good shots out there. I do have a good track record for, consistently enough being able to perform when that opportunity arises. So I'm thankful for that. But it's one of those things, like if the stars align, like for example, like if the terrain, if the target, right, sets itself up or presents itself at that, in the environment where you can employ those skills, like, and the other guys don't have those skills, or let's just say they're more in place to where, they're have difficulty identifying where you're at, but you can, where they are, like you could brain some hate on them. So it's a definite nice tool to have in your tool belt. Don't roll it out. It's worth having. But yeah, you're not gonna be likely, at least here, to be using that at all times. It's going to be more of an opportunistic thing.
Yeah, I think the same thing would apply to the vast majority of the Mississippi and east, with all of the vegetation, all the micro, and the shrubbery, and just the distance and micro terrain features. So I mean, I don't think it's limited to the Southeast or Pacific Northwest. So didn't mean to interrupt
you. Handle Skywalker's comment here. He says he's got a field manual pegs the A2's maximum range at 800 meters. That's against area targets. Like you see a truck out in a field, you just want to put some hate and discontent on them. Against point targets, it's 500 meters. I can tell from my time when I was in the Corps, I would have no trouble engaging a target with iron-sighted A2 at 500 meters. I've done it in competition too, even with an A1. I will say that while it can be done, having an LPVO makes it a whole hell of a lot easier. Any type of optic would, even just a magnified red dot, but it can be done with irons and it can be done with devastating effect. And there's so many examples and histories of that being done that it would take the rest of the live stream and name them all. But needless to say, yes, you can be effective at 500 meters with iron sights.
There is a comment I want to address, which is, can the clicks be relied on KAC? And I'm thinking that the MBUS backup sights. It's been my experience, especially for the Knights Armament micro backup sights. Those are extremely effective. I did a video on how much I rely on the click adjustments on that rear sight. I actually built a patrol rifle for red dot. My red dot zeroed for 100 meters, and any engagements past 100 meters, I rely on those iron sights for that particular setup.
Yeah, I have found my Magpul backup iron sights to always be functional and perform the job they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got to say, so I absolutely love doing like Winter Forge every year. And this last Winter Forge was, in my opinion, like the epitome of like what that training should be. Just because all the planets aligned and like we just had atrocious cold snow weather. It was just fantastic. Absolutely miserable. It was just great. And it really put gear to the test. Let me tell you guys. I mean, from everything from the damn socks on your feet to the optic on your weapon. And at one point, and I had 3 separate aiming devices. I had a optic that I could passively aim with. I had a laser engagement unit Steiner D-ball I2 on my rifle, and I had iron sights. And 2 out of the 3 at one point were essentially inoperable just because of like ice and just other factors. And if it wasn't for having like iron sights, like I wouldn't have been able to engage with my weapon. So, and I've had not at Winter Forge, but I've had RMRs just be out of commission, man, for whatever reason, just either ice or they got covered with debris or whatever. They fog up and like really cold weather or something. Like I've had situations. I don't know. I can't recall exactly what the circumstances were. I just remember that I couldn't freaking use it. So stuff happens with optics. So I am a proponent of having backup iron sights. Absolutely. And if you can't pass the range, then make sure you're able to remove that optic.
Mm-hmm.
So Les brought up a really great point a while back about iron sights and that blade sight versus peep sight, right? About being there in the, what is that? Where you do your winter brutality or whatever matches. Why don't you tell that story, Les, about the peep sights getting filled up with ice and whatnot?
Back in 21, did a demo match with Varl Staleka that had myself, Ian from Forgotten Weapons, the bloke and chat from Bloke on the Range. And it was just a demo match because COVID had shut everything down. And they were using classic period rifles. And Ian rocked this one stage because he was shooting a Mosin Nagant like it would be in the Winter War and everything with notch sights on it. Both Bloke and Chap ran into problems because one of the things we were crawling through the snow. Their peep sights got clogged with ice and they were eventually unable to engage. Even I outperformed them using my trusty AR RPK that I took over with an ACOG. And Ian and I were able to complete the course of fire. Bloke and Chap were not, just because their sights were all iced up.
Yeah, with the blade sights, you're saying you could easily get your hand on it and wipe the ice out. But the peep sights, you'd have to find some kind of tool or plunger or bullet tip or something to scrape that ice out of the hole.
Yeah. Now, one of the things is, like, I do want to point out, these were in a competition. So, yeah, if your peep's clogged, your time goes out the window and your stage time just augers in. But remember, in a real fight, you're going to be there with all your friends. So if you're out of the fight for a minute or two to clear out a site or reload or fix a malfunction, you still got the rest of your team, your squad, your platoon laying down the hate. So it's not that critical there as it is in a competition.
Yeah, I just found that interesting because I always wondered if there was any advantage at all over blade sights versus peep sights, because peep sights, they center the eye. I mean, they're just awesome sights, and I never heard of any any real world advantage to the Russian or some of the other nations blade sights over a peep.
Well, there must have been a perceived advantage to it because there are documented cases in Guadalcanal and Bougainville where the paramarines armed with the Johnson 1941 would cut down their peep sights into notch and post sights, and even go as far as to cut the wings off the front sight so they would line up correctly. And that was felt to be an advantage in the close ranges that they were encountering the Japanese in the jungle.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. Well,
yeah, here's one. Brent, have you tried that Geissele rail mounted bayonet mount yet?
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. Let me grab that real quick. Give me a second.
Well, Brent's going finding his mount. I'll address the age-old thing using one of Doc's arguments that, yes, the bayonet is still entirely relevant, still in the 21st century, and it will be for a long time to come. And for his people say it's obsolete because they never use it. Well, we don't use nuclear weapons, but nobody considers them obsolete.
They're both scary as shit.
Oh, man, you're going to have me go down a rabbit hole with the bayonet thing. So I just actually posted I was watching a Ukrainian combat footage video the other day, and a guy, a freaking warfighter, man, one of his buddies throws a hand grenade. It goes off, and it's only like 10, 15 meters right in front of him. And as soon as that grenade goes off, he gets up and he rushes that fighting position, bayonet fixed. And I didn't see any, Russian, combatant in that fighting position, but rest assured, if he was in there, that dude would have, jumped in and finished the job. So I remember some comments because I recently posted an infantryman's guide over the bayonet, and I remember a comment or two saying that, like, oh, I've never seen bayonets used in Ukraine. Well, fucking within days of me posting that video, I just saw one, right? And I even had a picture in my video from back in like 2014 before the Russian invasion, but while they were still having skirmishes of like prisoners being escorted. So anyways, let me get through this. So thanks to commenters on my bayonet video, I learned about this thing. This is a Geissele, I think you call it a super stabby or something like that. But anyways, it mounts with your Picatinny rails, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Some light helps. All right, so there it goes. But anyways, it attaches to your Picatinny rails, and then it enables you to mount a bayonet on some of these free float handguards that are out there. And then obviously it doesn't affect your accuracy whatsoever. But let's be real, guys. If you're in bayonet range, right, you're closing with the enemy, like your rifle is going to be minute a man. It's this accuracy concern is a non-issue in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So there's another one by shit, I can't remember. It slipped my mind. I just ordered it. Somebody told me about it. But it was for M-Lock, and I have an M-Lock rifle, so I was going to order it and put it on that one. The only problem I'm having with this one right here, this Geissele Super Stabby, is the way it's contoured right here. It gets in the way on my Daniel Defense, and my Daniel Defense is what I was going to put this on. So I'm going to have to either take a Dremel or grind that down some to make it fit. So that's the only downside to it.
So my question is, are you going to be able to pick up a 130-pound Chinese man by your rail?
Only one way to find out.
That's right.
So anyways, I'm just glad to see people are coming up with stuff like this. Okay. Because I mean, the army has completely abandoned the bayonet concept. Marine Corps, I'd like to say we're still in the fight with it. Problem is they are now issuing suppressors to essentially all infantry Marines. And even though those weapons are still capable of firing, or I mean, even though they can still remove the suppressors and mount bayonets, like, we're gonna go in that rabbit hole of, well, suppressors always need to be on the rifle, and that's a whole nother topic of conversation in and of itself, right? But like how what are the odds that a infantry platoon commander is going to say, all right, gentlemen, take your suppressors off and mount your bayonet? It's probably not going to happen. So,
like anything, look at the history of the bayonet. It has evolved in U.S. history. At one time, our bayonets looked like trowels because it was supposed to be your shovel. And then there was a time, like in World War I, it was this freaking long. It was like a sword. Now it's down to the level of being a fighting knife. Now we've added wire cutting to it. Don't worry, they'll find a way to make it work. Every time they've come out with a new rifle and stuff, they find a way to make the bayonet work. And to address Cletus's thing here about Perez at Goose Green and Scott's Guard at Mount Tumbledown fixed bayonets, yes, they did. There's a great memoir by an Argentine officer at Mount Longdon when 3 para surrounded them. When he heard all the bayonets fixing through the crisp night air, he knew he lost the battle before a shot had been fired.
So, one of these days I'll sit down with somebody and I'll recall what took place in the Josh Cemetery, at least my story. And all I can tell you guys is, like, at one point we got online and we started pushing into the cemetery. And I mean, you want to talk about like butthole factor, like that type, like getting online and pushing into where the enemy is, like that was nerve wracking. And I will tell you with 100%, there were 2 things on my mind. One, because I mean, all I could think about was like some freaking terrorist's SVD scope on my fucking chest right now. And 2, I don't want to lose face amongst my peers, right? Those were the driving forces that were propelling me to move forward. And at one point I took my bayonet out of the sheath and mounted it on the end of my rifle. And I'm telling you, there's a psychological aspect with the warfighter yourself, as well as the enemy, about that bayonet, because once that bayonet went on my rifle, like it gave me an extra warm and fuzzy stepping into that cemetery that was essentially a mount town from hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's a psychological aspect that just people that haven't experienced that may not understand. And, I see some of the comments like on my last video and other videos where we talk about bayonets, and one guy, I don't know what his fucking background is, but he commented like he was part of the special forces or something, and he'd be like, "Oh, you'd be laughed at the team room when you talk about bayonets." Like, dude, go fuck yourself. Like there is an absolute necessity and need for a bayonet, and I'm telling you, you can't replicate that feeling that it instills in combat when you fucking click that shit onto your muzzle. It literally took my mind to a whole nother level where I was stepping into the unknown against the enemy that was literally within feet and yards in front of me. So
I think there's also a big difference between the guys that actually train to employ that weapon and guys that they don't, they just know it's a knife. You know what I mean? They never actually like train to use it on another human being, affixed to the rifle, So without that background, I think it's more difficult for folks to grasp the utility of it.
The admin use of bayonets, Fast Company Battalion was change of command. We were in dress blues with bayonets. Not a single motherfucker fell out of that formation. Not a single one.
I tell you, if you go to the Sunset Parade and watch Nathan and I do their drills, man, those M1 Garands with their bayonets, that is some dick hardening shit right there. If you're a freaking devil dog, for sure. So
nothing like another man trolling a weapon with a bayonet to get your dick hard now.
But it's Viagra.
I never thought about it that way, but you do have a point there. Yes.
Brent, I'm sorry. You told me that 3 out of 4 in a fire team have suppressors.
No, I was saying that all the infantry Marines were getting suppressors. So everybody in a current infantry line company, like the standard issue rifle is an M27. Now I still see M4s mixed in there. I think that's team leaders. I don't know what the plan with that is. I don't know if they're like the last to get M27s, or if we're just going to keep using the M4 for the team leader role. I've been detached from the infantry for about 2 years now. My last unit before I went to my current one was a anti-tank training company. So it was a bunch of 0352 tow gunners, still grunts, still infantry, but it wasn't your traditional infantry battalion. So I haven't seen like the latest and greatest, but from what I'm watching, when I'm seeing like the Marines news reels that are coming out of like Marines training, it looks like your infantry Marines are primarily outfitted with M27s, which is true. That's how it was when I left there. But you still have M4s in the mix, but they all seem to have suppressors now. So
no squad automatic weapons at all.
So that's the funny thing. So the M27 came into the Corps' ranks to replace the M249 squad automatic weapon, right?
Gotcha.
And then it was so effective in Afghanistan at, picking off freaking Taliban at long ranges that they're like, this thing is fantastic. And then at one point we just decided like, hey, it's not going to just be our automatic rifle. It's going to be our standard infantry rifle. Mm-hmm. So the difference is, and it's kind of going back to, like Vietnam era, where your automatic rifleman had the same weapon essentially as your regular rifleman. It just had some, modifications to it. Right. Mm-hmm. So your automatic rifleman is going to have more magazines. He's going to have maybe a different, set of accessories. But essentially everybody has the same service rifle, and you have the ammunition commonality across the team and the squad. So, but the M27 is our like primary service weapon until you start getting into the like support roles, and that's when you're going to start seeing M4s and hell, maybe even a couple M16A4s still floating around.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm not complaining. It's a good service rifle, man. So,
I think it's an okay service rifle. It was better than its original configuration, the M4.
Well, I will agree with Paveway Jadam here. He said they should have bought the CAC LMG to replace the SAW. Yeah, considering the LAMG is even lighter than the M27, all about that.
I see a comment asking about the Marine Corps dropping to 12 Marines instead of 13. Dude, I'm telling you right now, the Marine Corps is going through this crazy shift in everything. I mean, everything. The way the squads are composed, the way we do business. We don't have tanks anymore. I mean, tanks have been gone for a while now. They're changing up everything. Chris Reed posted earlier, he's going through the School of Infantry right now. Eventually I want to get him on the stream just so we talk about like how School of Infantry is ran now, because it's not your typical SOI anymore. It's the Infantry Marine Corps, and like they spend longer there, and they go through essentially all the weapon systems, and they just do a whole bunch of stuff. They're making these dudes better trained, more well-rounded infantry Marines. So by the time they get to the fleet, they have a way bigger knowledge base than, old freaking Lance Corporal Brent back in the day checking into, Victor 1-4 had. So.
No, that'd be a good chat.
Yeah. I look forward to it. He said he'll do it too. So what else we got, fellas? Spent 40 minutes talking about iron sights and bayonets. I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
There's a lot of good stuff coming up here in the comments section. A lot of it's going by too quick.
Yeah, I know, right? So I am super excited about these bayonet mounts though. Like, let me tell you, I got high hopes for this. I gotta take some Dremel work to this, but I'm gonna make it work. I will freaking bayonet the mayor's son if and when he ever gives up our position and swallows some sort of tracking device for the enemy. Never heard of the Geneva Convention.
No,
it keeps you warm tonight, huh?
Yes.
At High Desert Brutality, Brent, we actually simulated Red Dawn.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, you had to sit there and engage close-in targets because you've just come out of your classroom at Calumet High, and you have to engage the paratroopers. Then you got in a truck, fired on the move, and then when you got in your fighting position, the Russian paratroopers were coming over the hills at you, and you had to engage them. It was awesome. Thought about you the whole time.
Dude, so several years ago, and you guys can go back on my channel and watch these, but I think we did this like 3 years in a row. We had an annual Red Dawn training event. Maybe it was just 2 years in a row. But everybody would show up and they would either dress like a Russian or they dress like a Wolverine. And we would just set up courses of fire. The first one was kind of cheesy. You know, it was just kind of just going out there shooting comm block weapons. But the second year, you know, I gave like a little like 5-paragraph order, and like, you know, we set up an enemy camp. You know, it was supposed to be the POW camp. And we actually conducted like a raid on this camp, and we had Tannerite on some of the like the set up bunkers and stuff. It was fun, man. It was a good time. So the problem is, you know, people where I go and shoot at, you know, people are moving in from California and New York and all those other places, and they're buying up all the land around us. So like our SDZ at our range, you know, has shifted so many times, and now it's getting to the point where you really can't even do that stuff out there anymore. So you don't know what I'm talking
Assassin
about.
of the Gray, you said my videos made you afraid of taking your weapons to Finland. Why is that? I've got a couple videos on my channel about how getting guns over there, and as long as you comply with the law, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, unless you said there was a bunch there, you had a bunch of like A-lister YouTube guys over this year, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was on the media squad. I was there with Forgotten Weapons, Bloke on the Range, Admin Results, Print Shoot Repeat, Blue Jean Operator, and a few other guys, Kit Badger. Yeah, it was kind of a who's who of YouTube over there.
It was funny. Admin came out with a video the other day talking about you know, competition shooting versus like tactical shooting, and I was jokingly sending a message to Les. I was like, oh, I think he watched our live stream the other night, and he goes, he did. I just talked to him, and he told me he did.
Yeah, the guy was good. He came in, I think, 4th place overall in the competition. I mean, he was smoking it over there and doing it with a good old AR carry handle setup.
Oh, is that right? Good on
Yep.
Good on him. Let's see.
Easy. You deal with it by PMCSing your rifle and cleaning it all the time.
Like go to
That's how you deal with it.
Yeah, I can't, you know, I've done a lot of splashes and amphibious stuff, and I can't really think of a time where it was ever really an issue, right?
We never did anything different.
Yeah.
You just cleaned your weapon that you were going to do anyways.
Your life as a grunt is to train for war and clean your fucking gear.
That's right.
Weapons maintenance. It is not uncommon as an infantryman to go down to the armory and you will spend like 8 hours there just scrubbing. That's why back in the day, when you were checked out your M16A2, it was silver.
Mm-hmm.
It had no bluing left on it.
That's right.
Devil Dog out there with his fucking AP brush and his bore brush.
Everybody needs their star chamber inspected.
Yes. I saw your video the other day on that, Stoker. Oh, let's see what we got. We're gonna have flesh bayonet. Yes, you got to work on your techniques though. Your thrusting and your slashing, right? It's all in the hips. That's where you generate your power. So, yes, and it stays locked and cocked, ready to rock. Maybe we can talk about this, Stoker. So Stoker asked me today. I don't know if this is some sort of OPSEC, Stoker. Please stop me. No,
No,
but he floated the idea of doing a short film, like a legit one, where dudes, we'd actually pay people to be in the video, like do a real short film. And I have people every time I do these little like short films at my house and stuff. I got people all the time like, oh, you need to do a full length video and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, Stoker's like, hey, how would you like to do a real one? Like legitimate. So that I don't know, guys, that might be something coming down the pipe in the future. That would absolutely have to be crowdfunded. So there's no way I could get like 20 military aged Asian males, if we were doing a Vietnam one,
Yeah.
and convince them to come out to our property to film for free. So, I was talking to Stoker and he's like, well, what do you think we should do? Or I was saying, like, what do you think we should do? And he's like, oh, I don't know. What about a Vietnam one? And I was like, I only got one Asian guy that films with me, and I have to film him dying 20 different ways with 20 different, Vietnam NVA uniforms. It's like I've kind of weared it out,
Mm-hmm. I already got some stuff storyboard, man. It's gonna be
yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Honestly, I think I remember somebody commented one time and they were like, go to the local colleges, like the community colleges, and find like the acting classes and just post a paper on the door or something where it's kind of like a classified ad. Like it might read weird, like in search of 18 to 20-year-old Asian male for production.
Actually, you're not wrong. That's a lot of these fan films for like Firefly and Star Trek. That's how they get the people to star in them.
Mm-hmm.
They just put a sign up.
Yeah.
You got a couch in your
yeah, I see
shack
that.
there?
I see that. I'll have to put one. I'll have to make one. We can do that, Stoker. We'll be sitting in a room and we'll just have a little couch and they'll come in one time and
So tell me, are you gonna be all right if I inspect your star chamber?
Do you like bayonets? Good stuff.
Hell yeah.
Let's see. What else we talking? Oh, Stoker, you had a conversation earlier or a topic earlier. Is it Tuberville? Senator Tommy Tuberville?
Tuberville, yeah.
Tuberville. So he is a Republican senator from Alabama, and this has been going on for some time.
Mm-hmm.
But he's essentially held up a lot of promotions for like general officers, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. So our ACMAC, our Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, is currently acting Commandant of the Marine Corps, but he hasn't been, sworn in to become the Commandant of the Marine Corps yet, because he's part of this this filibuster or whatever you want to call it, and essentially it's stemming from the Biden administration's Department of Defense. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Stoker, but they essentially enacted the reimbursement for female service members to go get reproductive care, which includes abortion, and being reimbursed for it, and get like time off and stuff like that to do it. So that's what this is all about, right? The senator's like, no, we shouldn't be funding abortions with service members. So that's what he's held off, and like none of these guys are getting promoted currently. And this has been going on for several months. So Stoker, you brought this up, so you want to speak to this?
Yeah, well, I think the big talking point is how degrading it is to readiness and everything else. But I think all of the politics aside, if you look at how the Army is saying, the Army goes rolling along, it's the same across all the branches. Regardless if somebody's missing up top, you're going to find a way if somebody's acting and they're filling a slot or whatever. But I just find it interesting that I think there's like 300 promotions that are on hold. And so that's not just promotions, but that's assignments as well. Because a lot of those flag promotions, general promotions are due to an assignment. Ultimately has no bearing on readiness, especially down to the team and squad level. They don't give two shits. And Tommy Tuberville was Auburn, so he, in that sense, he can pound sand, but,
You got anything on this, Les?
Some 3 stars not getting a 4-star. I couldn't care.
Right.
We've been told since the day we stepped on the boot camp and it stood on the yellow footprints that if there's 2 Marines there, one of them's in charge.
That's
so
right.
It's like nobody's not in charge. Yes, he doesn't have a title, but the assistant commandant can go do all the shit the commandant does if there's no commandant. It's a name game and it's a paycheck. Who fucking cares?
Right. And it's a big paycheck, so I really don't give a shit.
Yeah. It makes no shits to Lance Corporal Snuffy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really affected operational readiness
right.
to many levels.
There's not a MEU out there that suddenly had to turn around and come back to port.
Right.
You don't have a MAG out there going, I can't hang bombs on the jet today. And the rotor heads aren't going, well, I can't fucking fly because we don't have a commandant. No, that's not fucking happening.
My only concern, though, and I'm trying to look at this from all perspectives, is, when you do something like this, like it opens a door for, let's say we get a Republican president, right? And they implement something I would be very in for. Let's say, what's that?
Tit for tat.
Yeah, exactly. But let's say they reverse some of these policies that have been implemented since the Obama administration. I don't need to go down a list and point them all out, but things that have fundamentally changed combat arms over the years. What if you had a Republican president come in and want to reverse some of that stuff, which will never happen because our side doesn't have fucking balls anymore. And then you have a left-wing senator that does the same thing. Right. So it's like you open up Pandora's box with these type of things. But I mean, look what the left has done with the impeachments, right? They make impeachment. They made impeachment like just a routine procedure now with every single president that comes on board. So
true that.
Yeah. It is what it is. They're going to do what they're going to do. All politicians are two-faced. They're all hypocrites and stuff. They will do whatever they do, what they see necessary. And, take a look at this shit they're doing to Trump. I mean, some of this stuff is just completely, utterly bullshit, but it hurts him, so they'll do it, regardless of what it'll mean downrange. And when the other side decides, okay, well, fine, we're going to do it to you. Oh my God, they'll scream foul so loud, and it's whatever. Anyways, back to a more pleasant topic. Had one of the commenters here asking, is a revolver still viable? Sure. Why wouldn't it be?
Didn't leave shell casings.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read some of the comments here.
Yeah. Matter of fact, to point out the effectiveness of the revolver, the GIGN used the Maneurin MR73, which, by the way, is a fantastic revolver if you ever get your hands on one. They used those things right up to about 10 years ago when they finally started issuing Glocks. And from what I understood, the old hands didn't give up their MR73s. It was just the new guys that got their Glocks, and they just phased them out that way. So, yeah, I don't think you are unarmed if you're armed with a revolver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, didn't it? I remember seeing. I can't remember what the occasion was called, but it was a plane hijacking, and the French special forces like retook the plane, and I believe one of their guys had like a 44 Magnum or something, and that was like part of their takedown team. Les, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was an MR73. It was actually 357 Magnum.
Okay.
They're wonderful guns. I mean, expensive as hell and totally worth it. The gun is so well built that speaking with the rep one time, he told me I could return my MR73 for servicing after I'd put 150,000 rounds through it. They're designed for the GIGN to go out and put 150 rounds of full power 357 through it every day. And they do, or they did when they were using them as their main line. It's highly capable. And, if somebody said I could only take my MR73 into combat, I would not feel unarmed.
Okay, so I asked this guy because he made a comment after I got done talking about double-edged sword and everything. He said that was revisionist history, and I said, "What are you talking about?" So this is what he responds: the idea of Democrats being responsible for the overuse of impeachment. Look at what happened during the Obama administration, and then look at the MTG and Laura B getting into cat fights over impeaching. Obama wasn't impeached. What are they talking about?
I mean,
Maybe
somebody,
Bill Clinton.
Republicans talked about it. Clinton was impeached, but
and truthfully, I mean, you could go back to that point because the Republicans knew that that impeachment was never going to go anywhere with Clinton. But I mean, that's going back a long time.
Yeah, but what does impeachment mean? Didn't do shit to Clinton. First one didn't do anything to Trump. Trump's second one, he was already out of office.
Yeah.
What does it mean? I mean, it just means we say you did something bad. The Senate has to convict.
Yeah.
The Senate doesn't seem to do it. So getting impeached would be like, who cares? It's like almost like that old thing when I was in and stuff. You weren't a real Marine until you got your ninja punch.
That's
right. The same thing.
Well, I'm just saying, like, Democrats impeached Trump twice, right? For what? Like, really? That was high crimes and misdemeanors. He literally gave a speech at a rally and said, peacefully, what was his exact words? Peacefully walk over to the Capitol.
Something about go peacefully, make them hear your voice, something to that effect.
Yes. And where was the inquiries in, Nancy Pelosi not bringing in extra security when, all this stuff was brought up beforehand? It's almost, if you really want to look under a magnifying glass, it's almost like they wanted this to happen. Maybe they did, right? They wanted things to escalate. I mean, hell, there's video of officers, Capitol Police, opening the gates and letting the protesters walk on into the Capitol. Like, you can't deny that stuff. Like, there's video of it.
Yeah, some of those videos are acting like fucking tour guides.
Right.
Yeah, and 100% there is agent provocateurs in that crowd. That what was it, the Ray Sims or whatever, that one guy,
Ray Epps.
Ray Epps, yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I seriously, man, I'm going to condemn any type of violence and stuff like that. But like, there was one person that was killed at the Capitol, and that was Ashley Babbitt, one of the protesters. That's it. No officers were killed that day. And the ones that died following that had nothing to do with that day. I don't care what you say. Not even the families say that they died from that. I saw these things where, remember we had my liberal buddy when we had him on the stream. He was trying to claim all these officers that died following the January 6th. And he's like, "Oh, they had PTSD from that day." Get the fuck out of here! Mm-hmm. Come on. So,
yeah, 100%. But when that event went down, they claimed it. They're like, "Yeah, these officers died." Blah blah. Come to find out, it's like a heart attack they had like a week later or whatever. You know what I mean?
And the riots, the riots that took place at the Capitol don't hold a grain of salt to what we saw during the Summer of Love in 2020. I mean, buildings were burned to the ground. Officers were really injured across the nation. People were murdered across the nation. And yeah, they're saying that all these officers at the Capitol Police Department took their lives because of PTSD from the Capitol.
And those were fiery, but mostly peaceful.
Yeah, I remember the CNN reporter. Mostly peaceful protests. Like I said,
I'll go as far as to say with.
Go ahead, Les.
I'll go as far as to say with Ashley Babbitt, she's dead because of a negligent discharge. Scared, jumpy officer because it was one shot. Every police officer I've ever talked to is told double tap. And we got history replete with examples where guys in New York shot 42 times reaching for his wallet, or in DC shot 18 times, or the newspaper people in LA getting shot 42 times by 6 officers.
Well, to be fair, if you watch that video, there's several protesters, right? An officer is accountable for every round he fires. So if an officer shoots like in those encounters that you're talking about, where they're shooting multiple rounds, shooting until the threat is stopped, like chances of you hitting one of those other protesters that aren't coming through the window or door or whatever it was, like goes to the roof, right? So like I could totally see only one shot being fired because he's accountable for every round he fires.
Great fire discipline. Still think it's negligent discharge because the way they've made January 6th out to be, we would all know that officer's name because they'd be holding up as a hero, probably try to give him a Medal of Honor. And yet we don't know who he is.
I thought they did. I thought he came out and they gave a interview. Did he not? I could have swore
if they did. I missed it, and I'll stand corrected if that is the case. But for the longest time, nobody knew who he was. And yet you have an officer shoot somebody like George Floyd or what's his name out there in Ferguson and all that. Man, we know that officer's name. It's plastered all over national news.
Yeah. We're all over the map tonight with our conversation.
Yeah, hey, well, when you free for all, Brett, this is what you get, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, isn't this what got Tucker fired? Is his coverage of January 6th?
Yeah, because he had that interview with the chief of the Capitol Police who was saying he was hung out to dry.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole bunch of things. The voting machine stuff, the Ray Epps thing. I mean, he clearly wasn't making any friends with that network by actually exposing what was going on.
See, I mean, I don't think anybody had any illusion like you were on the left when you posted that last comment, but I mean, we can all agree with this, right? we can see common ground. I don't understand why that can't be done in this country anymore. Like the Second Amendment is across the board and it's applicable to everybody. So, whether you fall on the left side or the right side of the political spectrum, like we should all be able to agree that the ATF should be abolished and there should not be an NFA.
Yeah, or the GCA. I mean, basically all of it.
I got it. It's amazing when I travel overseas how we have access to more firearms than just about anybody. Switzerland does a little bit better than us, but there's some of the things we can't have that people in Europe, for example, can have easily, like suppressors. You just walk into a store and buy it. Open bolt guns are not banned there. So you can buy a complete replica of an MP40 in Germany that's open bolt. We can never have that here. They don't understand the whole arm brace thing over there because they can have 12-inch rifles. It's no big deal.
I mean, I've never understood that. And I ultimately have faith that, the arm brace deal is going to get struck down in the courts and it's going to pave the way for, the repealing of the NFA, right? Because essentially, I mean, we know that, a short-barreled AR pistol with arm brace is similar to a short-barreled rifle, right? And yet you haven't had this big world collapse because you've had a bunch of AR pistols in the mix, throughout the country. Like it never happened. And I mean, I don't understand the short-barreled rifle. It does not make the rifle more accurate. It does not make the rifle more lethal. Actually, it does the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, it's less lethal, less capabilities.
Right. And I think we've had conversations of barrel length in terms of infantrymen, right? You don't want a standard infantry rifle to be a 10.5 inch freaking AR-15. That's not a good rifle. And man, I can't remember who I was talking to. It might have been Abner from Uniform Tango 74. And I think he was telling me that, we all love the AK-74 SU, right? Your little Krinkov shorty. We all love that here in the United States. But the reality is in Russia, they call that Suka or Suchka or something for a little bit, and it's not a favorable rifle, right? They look at it and like, oh, that thing sucks. It doesn't, doesn't have the accuracy, doesn't have the range, But here in the U.S., we're like, oh, give us it. We want more Krinkhoffs here in the United States. But the reality
we
is,
all want what we cannot have.
Right.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, the majority of when I started collecting weapons was under the assault weapons ban. And so none of my stuff initially none of my new stuff, I should say, had bayonet lugs, had fixed stocks, things of that nature, right? So one day I bought like a folding, like Romanian Romanian folding stock for my one of my AKs. And I'm like, well, maybe if the day comes or by some miracle the AWB sunsets, I'll throw that on a gun and I'll have a really cool folding stock on my AK, right? And then sure shit, 2004, it sunsets. I'm like, what? Really? I go race into that closet, pull out the wire folding stock, beat that wood stock off my AK, put it on there, whip the stock open. Oh yeah, raise it up to my head. This sucks. Take it off, put the wood stock back on.
No, you're absolutely right. Certain stocks are garbage. It's like back in the day before we have all the options we had now, the original collapsible stocks on ARs were absolute garbage. Why anybody would want one of those is beyond me. But we've kind of solved that problem in the modern day. But you're absolutely right. Those wire underfolder stocks in your AK are just horrible to shoot with, especially in full auto.
Hey, real quick, Logan, if you want to jump in here, man, let me know. We'll bring you up. So, yeah, the AK underfolder stocks, they do suck. But I have several AK underfolders, I'll admit. So,
well, you got to have it.
10,
it's an
10 on the coolness
gun.
Factor for sure. 1 on applicability.
Yeah.
Well, that and the what is it? The MP40s. Those had the wire underfolding stocks are close enough, right? And I'm never going to own one of those, but I can have an AK with a underfolder stock that's close-ish.
Yeah. I mean the Russian PPSH 41, man, that had a essentially like a rifle stock, and that was just a superb submachine gun, and you had Germans picking that up every chance they got to use that. So
yeah, I think there's also that thing that applies to all soldiers in any military, and that's the enemy's weapons always better. There was a lot of problems with the Peppa-Shah. One of the main things was the drums were specific to the guns; they were not interchangeable. They didn't solve that problem until the 35 round stick mag that came late in the war. Also, the sights might as well not have been on those things. The ammo is ridiculously corrosive. I've never seen a Peppa-Shah that doesn't have a barrel that looks like a sewer pipe.
I got for those of you that don't know, I like to collect a lot of demilitarized weapons. It's kind of my way around of like filling that void in my life where I can't have full autos legally. So, but I got my hands on a Russian Papa-Shah that's demilled, and it's pretty cool, man. It's just ergonomically it feels good. You can just tell it's just rust through production, and they're just trying to get those out in mass to people. But for what it is, especially during a time that it came out, like it is a fantastic submachine gun, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and give credit to the Russians. They went up against the Suomi during the Winter War, and they were like, "Oh, we've got to have these things." And the Peppa-Shah is basically a copy of it. Same, 71 drum like the Suomi, same basic layout, same sighting system, same rate of fire. They didn't get hung up on the fact that it ain't ours. They just said we need it, and they copied it.
That's one guy posts Papa-Shah. He goes, 1 drum, 1 kill. I do want to address the comment. So, we've had several streams discussing the Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine, and I just want to go around the horn as it pertains to that comment. Like, what are your guys' current outlook on, like the aid going over to Ukraine?
Well, I've said several times, and I'll stand by what I've said. The United States should be the arsenal of democracy. Now, it shouldn't be just a blank check for sure, and we do have to have some kind of accountability. But yeah, I firmly believe that if we support them against the Russians, then the fight's over there. Then the fight's not in Poland, in Germany, in France. And Putin's a bully. He'll get away with things if he can get away with them. Taking Ossetia in South Georgia, taking Crimea in 2014. He got away with it because he could. Now that NATO's standing up, and NATO is standing up, in its own way, and providing the weapons, that's made all the difference. Let's be honest here. As much as the Russians are sucking wind in this war, they'd have been in Kiev and taken over if the West did not send all the aid that it sent. Are individual weapon systems going to make massive amount of difference? Yes and no. 30 M1 tanks aren't going to make a hill of beans worth of difference. The fact that the tanks keep coming to replace the Ukrainian losses, regardless of what type of tanks they are, that will make a difference. Whether they're Leopard 1s, Leopard 2s, M1s, Challengers, doesn't matter. Long as we keep sending weapons, the Ukrainians can keep fighting. We send better weapons. That'll keep the Ukrainians in the fight. Example, the naval war. Putin's lost the naval war to a guy who has no ships. So, I think we should send aid. I think we should continue to send aid, but there are limits. I mean, we can't send so much aid that it depletes our stocks. We can't send so much aid it hollows out our forces.
I really think this Ukraine thing wouldn't be a thing if Trump was in. I think it could have easily been solved through negotiation. And it probably would have never been a thing if we had someone competent, that had America's best interest at heart running the show when all that occurred. As far as sending weapons now, I think there's a lot of corruption in that. Not to say it may not be, if the choice was between sending boots on the ground versus weapons, okay, whatever. But I think this thing was wholly avoidable, and I think it could be resolved as well. So,
not a fan. I mean, I get it's a complicated issue, complicated world, and lots of ins and outs and things that we don't have the perception of because our foxholes, our aiming stakes aren't wide enough or whatever, or we think that they have a better perception than what they do, but from where I stand, essentially the blank checks and the propaganda and the deception and the corruption is just too much for me.
I just want to reply to Logan. So, man, if you can come and do audio and video. So the reason I say this is because, I watched Randall with Grunt Proof do a live stream the other night, and he brought in random people, and that was one of his stipulations. Like, you have to do video and audio, right? Because anybody can come in and not show their face and then claim XYZ, but there's a personal aspect of showing your face and doing stuff. So, but anyways, so I guess my response here. So from the get-go, I was pretty supportive of sending arms over there, but I did not want our latest and greatest shit. Like, I don't know how many times I said this in past live streams. Like, we have plenty of old stuff, right? Like, how many M16A2 service rifles are in stockpiles somewhere that, that kind of stuff could have gone over there, right? I remember during the 2003 Iraq invasion, like, a lot of our 7.62 by 51 millimeter linked ammunition for our M240 Golf medium machine gun was, in fact, M60 ammunition. How do I know that? Because the links had the holes in them, right? Modern M240 links didn't have holes in them. So, so we have plenty of surplus ammunition. TNT, I remember going through the infantry unit leaders course, and our TNT was from World War II. I mean, and they were like, yeah, we have to use this stuff up because it's becoming unstable. But I mean, we just have stockpiles of warehouses of just stuff that could have been, that type of stuff sent over there. Like, I had no problem with that, right? Rotate that stuff out, and then we can replace it with our newest stocks, right? So you can extend our service life on our stockpiles. But and I thought in the beginning that that's what was happening. I don't think that's happening anymore, guys. I think I was watching a video the other day, and I can't remember what piece of gear was, but it was like, I'm seeing like PEC 15s and, the NVGs that some of these dudes are wearing. I'm like, dude, there's no way that's surplus gear. Like, that stuff is brand freaking new. And
I don't think there is surplus gear, Brent, because I remember back in the 90s when I went in the National Guard, the active duty Army went from 18 to 10 divisions. The Army eliminated all three of its combat divisions. The National Guard eliminated 2 combat divisions. Okay, by my math, that's 13 divisions worth of gear. Yet in the 29th here in Virginia, we had no gear. We had M16A1s. We had Alice gears. We had some guys actually wearing 1956 pattern H harnesses. It was like the gear disappeared. Our company radio, the one radio we had in the company, was a PRC 25. I mean, I don't know what they do with it, but I don't think there's piles of gear. I think it just automatically gets destroyed at some point. And if you look back at United States history, we had that same problem coming out of World War I, going into World War II. There's the pictures during the Louisiana Movers, there's guys training with broomsticks because there wasn't enough rifles.
Oh, your surplus gear got left in Afghanistan, Brent.
Yeah. I'm definitely aware of that. So, but I mean, like our, like HIMARS launchers and stuff like that. Like, that stuff is not old. That's not.
No, it's brand new.
Yeah, those HIMARS that went over there, guys. Those were pulled from active duty and reserve stocks and sent over there and given to Ukraine.
It's the
I
complex.
bet you they pulled them off the MPF ships.
Well, I'm sorry, it's difficult to read the comments that are going by 100 miles an hour and then listen in. So what would you say, Les?
Well, I'm going to ask Chad. How am I clueless on Ukraine? Elaborate, Chad.
Oh, wait. Could I get one comment in here I need to address? To Septic Hunter. Yes, I'm still making those uppers. I had a batch of parts that got delayed for about a month, but I should be restocked in 2 weeks. And I still am out of the M60 bipods, but I still got plenty of RPK bipods. So yeah, once those barrels hit, I'll get back to work and we'll start pumping those out. Go ahead.
Thanks for the update, Mike. Stoker, I know you got to pop smoke here in a second. Do you have any final words you want to throw out?
Just as it related to earlier comment, as far as shit that is happening, there's certainly one group of people who's making a shit ton of money off of the Ukrainian conflict, and that's the big military industrial complex. And if there's one thing that they want, it's more conflict, because that's going to help them turning out more stuff and making more money. So war's a racket.
Yeah, Smetley Butler is right. 100%.
Fuck commies.
All right, Stoker. Well, man, I appreciate you jumping on tonight, brother.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you.
And just so you know, I've got what you asked me to do. I got it completed today. So
nice.
I'll let you know when it's uploaded and ready for download.
Sounds good, brother.
Yeah. Or you can go to my OnlyFans and pay $10.99 a month and get exclusive
Star Chamber.
Yeah, what I say my Pornhub name was, Brent 036969. No, 0369 all the time. That's what it was.
Yeah. Right on, guys. Always good to see you.
Later, buddy.
Later.
See you,
man. Yeah, so I was gonna say they approved like cluster munitions to go over to Ukraine, mainly because our stockpiles were run out. So that's what concerns me about all the aid we're sending over there. So I'm for hooking up the Ukrainians with gear. We've been training with the Ukrainians for years prior to the Russian invasion there. We've been doing, joint stuff with them for a long time. And, I was definitely for helping them out. But I do have some deep reservations about all the gear and equipment we're giving them. And let's be honest, guys, like they have a very corrupt government, right? They just relieved like their foreign defense minister, or what was it? Their defense minister for corruption. Like what is that guy? Is he like the equivalent to the SecDev for them, or
basically, yes.
Yeah. I mean, for corruption, like you're relieving their version of the SecDev for corruption. I mean, guys, what does that tell you? So, okay. I got the Logan guy says he's ready to rock and roll. So Logan, send me your email address, brother, and I'll give you the link. Go ahead, Les.
Yeah.
Or Mike.
I mean, no, it's like thing. Ukraine is a thing. Like we need to help them. Yes, we do. It's not a blank check. There has to be strings attached to it. Maybe like Lend-Lease where they pay it back after the war. Maybe it's like, hey, until you pay us off, well, your grain belongs to us. Things can be negotiated out. It doesn't need to be the unlimited blank check. It definitely doesn't need to give them stuff at our own expense. But you know what? We're America. We're industrial. We can produce things, crank up the production lines. And look at the history of Russia since Putin's taken over. Belarus is a puppet state. They went and took a province in South Georgia. They took Crimea in 2014. They would have tried to take Ukraine without a shot if they could. They tried it with a shot. It's not working out. But if they got Ukraine and walked in, then they'd start knocking on Romania and Poland's doors. And then once they're in those doors, it's right back to the Cold War. So, yeah, if we got to fight, this is where we fight. And if we can have somebody else do the fighting, and I don't know about you guys, I'm thrilled to have an ally at once who's willing to fight, because we went through 20 years of having allies that won't fucking fight.
Yeah, I don't know. My position is, or at least my understanding of the Russian position was they just wanted Ukraine as a buffer state. They didn't want it associated with NATO. They just wanted a separation between those countries, and they didn't want those NATO weapon assets basically on their doorstep. And I think they were essentially baited into taking out or attempting to invade Ukraine. I really think, like I said, if Trump was at the helm, he would have been able to negotiate that, just like he was able to solve that problem with North Korea and etc. So I think this was an American foreign policy problem more than anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't debate that for a second, Mike. And like all things in life, like after the car wreck, you can say, well, it was that guy pulled out in front of me or jammed his brakes on, or he was drunk driving, or I didn't see his brakes or whatever. The car wrecks happen. Now you got to deal with the aftermath. War's on, and once his I firmly believe once his tanks roll over Ukraine, they'll be knocking on the next guy's door.
I just still think this could be solved diplomatically. That's all I'm saying.
I fully agree. At this point, Russia's economy is in shambles. Putin's been proven to be a hollow actor. He's basically Xi Jinping's bitch now. So, yeah, it could be solved if we had people up to the challenge of solving it, and we don't.
Well, to be fair, I don't think our media is conveying how things are actually going over there. So I'm hoping that the guy that is a foreign volunteer that served over there can give us a little insight. But I mean, we all know that there was this big, planned offensive, and that stalled, right? So I've heard that they've made some headway in that, but what does that mean? But I think there's a lot of stuff that's not being told, and I think the Russians are doing a lot better than is being perceived.
Yeah, I also think the Russians completely underestimated the resistance to Ukraine. I did. I thought Russia was just going to roll through them
when they first went in for 100%. But now, here we are over a year later. Like, I don't think there's any underestimation. Like the Russians have not been sitting on their hands, and like they've been building defenses and mine the living fuck out of their defensive positions, and the Ukrainians don't seem to be able to punch through. So
no, it's a matter of time, really. I really think Russia is going to win the long game, provided that we don't get involved in a bigger way, which again, I think that would be a mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, Logan, I need your email, man. I can't if I post the link in the chat, I'm going to have like 20 motherfuckers trying to jump in here. So you got to give me something to send you a link through. Another thing I'm concerned about is like I don't really hear much talk about peace, right? Negotiations at all. It's all, hey, how much let's send billions of dollars over there in aid and weapons packages and stuff like that. Like it doesn't sound like anybody in this administration is trying to negotiate at all, anything. So, I mean,
Correct.
A big sticking point is Mike, something you already brought up. Like the Russians do not want Ukraine as part of NATO. Well, fuck. I mean, that should be on the table at negotiations, right? Like, even if Ukraine was going to be considered in joining NATO, NATO's never going to take them in until hostilities have completely, gotten to the point where it's not going to happen, right? We don't want World War III to kick off. So,
well, you and I don't. I think there's some people that actually may want that.
All right. I keep watching the comments. So I'm waiting for Logan's to drop his email in there, but I don't see it. So somebody give me a heads up if and when that comes. What else we got?
I do want to circle back to the revolver thing real quick. I really like revolvers for concealed carry. I don't think there's any better weapon for just making a gun disappear on your body and being for everyday carry. I think you're way less likely to have an ND with a revolver than a striker fire semi-automatic pistol, and you can carry it, with a round in the chamber ready to go. I also think for grappling or close self-defense engagements, I think the revolver may have an advantage because you can easily put a semi-automatic pistol in an out-of-battery state where it's rendered, non-functional. However, same can be true with the revolver by grabbing the cylinder or putting your finger between the hammer and frame. But as far as like pressing a gun into someone and pulling the trigger, a revolver, definitely could do that where a semi-auto can't. So it's a pro-con there. But I think the biggest thing is you can carry basically a full-size gun as far as full power cartridge gun, as far as pistols go, and still be like extremely concealable.
Yeah, I used to carry years ago. I used to carry a little 38 special as my like summertime concealed carry pistol, right? Because it's like in the summertime you're wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I didn't want to telegraph that I had, this big fucking smoke wagon on my side. So I just carried a little 38 special, did it for years. And I tell you, I shot with that pistol excellent. I mean, it was never a problem. It was double action. I was accurate with it. Yeah, I only had 5 shots, but I mean, it was tough. It was reliable, and it was even a Taurus. It's like bottom barrel of like, what everybody shits on. But it was one of the first pistols I ever bought, and it was it was a good little shooter. I still have it, so it's not my everyday carry.
Back in the day, the Taurus revolvers were good stuff. Their quality did slip in the 2010s, but yeah, especially if you had an late 90s, early 2000s Taurus, good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Way back in the day when my first rifle was SKS. That's not the case
Got
anymore.
you through, didn't it?
Yeah. That, for us, that was like, oh yeah, everybody starts off with an SKS, but now it's, you can get a Palmetto State Armory freaking AR for $500. And I just bought an AK from Palmetto State Armory with their Labor Day specials going on for like, under $600. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, if you need a modern semi-automatic rifle and you're not going to Palmetto to get one of their bare bones ARs, you're making a hell of a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely great value, amazing value.
Yeah, and the great thing about the AR, it's the Lego of guns. You may start out with a bargain basement gun, but you can upgrade it into your super uber tool. It's just time and money at that point.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, like, maybe in the early 2000s, 1990s, whatever, you had a lot of guys that weren't 100% standardized on the mil spec. So, you had large, small pin Colts, you had 60-61 aluminum guns instead of 70-75, you had cast guns instead of just forged and milled guns. So, but largely it's all standardized mil spec, 70-75, type 3 anodizing, on and on and on. So if you buy the bargain basement or the top of the line, you're getting still a very good rifle.
I'm trying to email Logan, see if I can get him in here. So you guys,
I'll even go further. The AR-15 was the only rifle I lost money on as far as buying as an investment. Everything else, SKSs, bolt actions, military surplus, whatever, all that stuff appreciated in value. The AR-15 just got better and better and better for cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, we figured out how to make them. One of the great things about the assault weapon ban was when we were limited to 10 rounds and we had to pay 3 times as much for a 10-round mag as we did a 30-round before. Magazine companies make good magazines. Magazines now are better than they have ever been, and they're cheaper. I remember in the 90s before the ban, you wanted to buy a 30-round mag for your AR. That was a $15, $18 investment. Now if you pay more than $10 for a P mag, you're getting ripped off.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, paid wage ADM. I remember the time of $100 Glock mags too. And now what? $15 for a P mag for your Glock. I mean, you can't go wrong. It works great. And talking to the guys at Zev, asking which is better, P mags for your Glock or factory Glock mags. And they were like, it's kind of an irrelevant question because yes, the factory Glock mag is better, but for what it takes to get that P mag to fail, nobody will ever encounter. And this is from a guy putting 1,000 rounds a day through a pistol to test it. So magazines are a non-issue now.
Yeah. I'm glad that Magpul finally started making those. So it's badly needed. I mean, there's some great companies out there that have really been like staples in propelling the Second Amendment, like Magpul, Palmetto State Armory. Fuck, what Palmetto State Armory has done for the average American citizen, holy crap! I mean, that is just, you want to talk about awesomeness. I'm not trying to shill for them. I mean, just look at the fact that they have AR-15s that are $500, like, and they've been doing this for years. And they're expanding like their realm into ammunition production. Like, that's phenomenal. So,
and there's other great companies out there too. Anderson Manufacturing, they make a good budget rifle as well. You got, Franklin Armory trying to push the envelope with the introduction of the binary triggers. You got, SB Tactical with their brace thing. They created a whole category of firearms with that. I mean, there's a lot of good guys putting in the work. Oh, Defense Distributed. I'm going to shelf for them a little bit. They've been helping out on the First Amendment, Second Amendment front as well. So, All
right, guys, we got Logan. He was in the chat. He said he was a Ukrainian volunteer. So welcome to the stream, brother.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, man, sounds great.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry.
Thanks for jumping on, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, but long time watching your channels and being in your chats. I know you didn't see me before, but yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, I appreciate it. So, if you don't mind, man, just introducing us and how you ended up over there and how everything went, because I mean, this is one time opportunity for us.
Yeah. I initially met some Ukrainians while I was serving in Iraq and kept in touch with those guys for a long time. And in 2014, I was in Afghanistan and I was in Soto South, and some guys reached out to me and they said, "Hey, man, uh, this revolution's going on, and I'm going to go to the east." And those guys ended up dying in 2015. But yeah, so I stayed in touch with some of the other guys, and you know, through the years, they've been like, "Hey, you want to come and visit us or whatever?" Or when I got out, I retired in 2016 from the Army, and they wanted me to come and visit them or serve with them or whatever. And at the time, it just wasn't right. I did some PMC work in the States and other places, and it just wasn't a good fit. But by the time the full scale started, they were asking me again, "Hey, man, when are you gonna honor your oath and come over here? You told us you were gonna come over." So finally, in May, I was able to make it happen. So went over there for a few months.
This past May.
Yes, yes, yeah. I just got back like 2 weeks ago. Not
Oh no,
even.
shit.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through the process? Like, how did you get over there?
I initially I made contact with some like intelligence officers from that place. I'm actually an intel guy myself. I did counterintelligence, human intelligence for the Army. And so, of course, you meet like your contemporaries in other countries. And I just used my contacts to say, "Hey, man, I want to come across. Is there a way you can, arrange for me to have a seamless travel through the, you know, Granica and through the border checkpoints and everything?" Because there's a shitload of blog posts to get into the country, and especially if you have to go through certain zones. And so they picked me up in Poland, drove me across the border, switched cars a couple of times. I had a colonel from the border service drive me to Lviv in the middle of the night because there's like a curfew. So of course, like you can't just show up at the border and get across. So, and they wanted to make sure that I wasn't like taking like public transport or something like that to get across. So they held my hand basically the whole way to get in. And then after I got to Lviv, met up with the guys, the officers, a couple of colonels from GUR and SBU, and they were basically telling me like what the plan was, and they had a lot of it was like delusions of grandeur because there's a lot of volunteers over there, but there's not a lot of like specialized volunteers. A lot of the guys going over there are like really good like combat arms guys, and I got to work with a lot of those individuals, but there's not a lot of like specific like trainers like for things like logistics and intelligence and those kind of skill sets. So they were excited to have somebody. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask. That was gonna be my next question. What did you end up doing? Did you end up doing intel stuff like you did in the Army, or did you do combat arms type stuff?
Actually a little mix of both, and some of the stuff like kind of outside my wheelhouse a little bit. I did some like counter IED stuff, so I like got to go to a couple of explosive schools and weapons intelligence schools, and some of the EOD guys over there actually allowed me to go over there and do some like make some breaching charges in Zaporizhia, and that was I'll tell about that in a minute. But initially, they had me sitting in Lviv for like a month almost, like doing background checks and making sure that I wasn't like a foreign intelligence officer. And yeah, so I did some instruction there, and I can't go into the exact units that I was training, but yeah, teaching them about like intelligence preparation in the battlefield, uh, counter, like because the Russians use a lot of like reconnaissance and sabotage groups, and that's like a huge problem, like penetrating lines and stuff like that. So they wanted training on how to counter uh, those reconnaissance groups coming across and like causing issues. Or one of the bigger issues was uh, they were coming across, infiltrating, and supplying their agents that were already in Ukraine. So like as you know, like there's a bunch of uh, agents like sleeper agents and just like other dudes that like talk to you know FSB and SVR and whoever on the phone, and they get their instructions or whatever, and they try to take care of that like SIGINT wise through like SBU. But a lot of times like they're resupplying and like giving these guys equipment and instructions like by hand. like dead drop style. And so they'll send guys across from different countries, not just like across like the front, and they'll like arrange dead drops or whatever tradecraft they're using, and they'll give these guys instructions on what to do, like sabotage or intelligence gathering. Most of the time, it involves like collection on where certain assets are, like air defense and stuff like that. But I can't go too much into that, like you said. Um, but that's a huge problem, is the insider threat.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that that's just a given the
Mhm.
long history between those two countries,
Mhm.
that you're going to have those issues there. So, can you give us any sense? I mean, you just recently got back. Can you give us any sense of what's actually going on the ground? Because it seems like there's a lot of like, obviously, there's propaganda on both sides,
Mhm.
uh, and I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Can you give us any sense from your perspective on
It's
how?
yeah, it's like if the defense in depth on both sides is like so significant that even like the Russians probably for the last 6 months, 7 months have been trying like light infantry assaults across. You've seen the terrain. It's just like fields with tree lines, and everybody knows they're in the tree lines, and there's drones and uh, ISR, and even the Russians have like camera towers and stuff like that. So there's like so much surveillance that you can't use slow moving maneuver tactics very easily, and both sides figured out pretty fast that to stop a mechanized assault, all you need is anti-tank mines. And so there's like just literally the problem is, especially like when I was in the southern front in Zaporizhia, they have so many lines of anti-tank mines everywhere that armored assaults like will just stop dead. And as soon as they slow down, the cornets and everything else are just going to start flying, and the lancets and everything else is just going to come down on you. So they've had to figure out how they can try to identify mine belts, and a lot of it's like using drones, like at night, like right when the sun goes down, they'll use IR and like the cooling metal of like the PMN mines and the anti-tank mines, like see the signatures under the ground. But it's hard, especially like they started too late in the assault in the summer, so like the grass grew, and they couldn't use that tactic anymore. So then you saw the videos of the guys like stepping out of the Bradleys and getting their lower bodies blown off. And it's just it's the breaching, and like there's not enough breaching charges, there's not enough like anti-mine charges, uh, and there's a significant lack of any kind of demining equipment like mechanized. So like the flails and every other kind of engineering equipment that's like that could protect an engineering company clearing a breach is just they'll get they take significant casualties, and there's only so many of those. I think there was only like maybe 4 for like a brigade. So I mean, once you lose 2 of those, I mean your combat effectiveness is like way down.
So I'm curious because I mean, we've all heard that this major counter or offensive was going to take place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
we'd send them Bradleys and other armored vehicles, and so is the rest of NATO. But you would think with this an armored push to break through Russian lines, like they would have systems like Mikulik, right? They'd have like
Mm-hmm.
Mikulik to be able to like. Surely they knew that these minefields were going to be there, and it shouldn't have been a
Yes.
surprise.
I can tell you with the like their Mikuliks and stuff like that, they had a bunch in the beginning of the war, but they used them for urban combat as like they basically what they did is they cut the charge at the end, and they launched it like a giant freaking TNT charge at a building and blew it up. The Russians were doing the same exact thing, and so they used up a lot of a lot of that equipment doing urban combat. And so now like they're in this like slow grind, and they don't have that stuff anymore. And yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that's going on, like as far as the problems with like Bradleys and like the Western equipment, is they're getting good training. Like I've seen the guys like they know the Bradley, they know the 113s, they know like even like Matt V's and Humvees, that they're good. They understand that Ukrainians are very good at like picking up on stuff. However, uh, a lot of the commanders, I would say like half the commanders are like younger guys that have been trained in like in Graph or JRTC, or even like they went to West Point where they did some sort of like joint officer training, and so those guys understand like most Western doctrine and how to utilize maneuver like combined arms and stuff like that. However, half of the guys, they didn't have enough officers, so like they reactivated a bunch of guys. Like my boss was an old guy he's like an old Spetsnaz guy, and he was they made him the commander of IDAR, but he's like his experience was like Soviet-Afghan war. So like they didn't go through any of that training, so they're getting all these like Bradleys and armored vehicles and Western equipment, but they don't understand the tactics how to use them, and so they're still like, all right, go and conduct an armored assault, but they're using the same using the same systems they would if they were using like BMPs and BRDMs, like those kind of tactics. And they don't understand like the weapon systems, the range, like the effective range of like a Bradley weapon system Bushmaster is like way better than like a BMP or something like that. So like you can stand off and fire at people. They're not doing that. They're trying to like charge at the positions on the tree line and use the Bradleys like that. It's like they don't understand. And then another thing is they don't understand they don't understand like mission planning, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things is like mission orders and mission planning like is almost non-existent, and especially like communication like to adjacent units, it doesn't exist. So instead of getting like a full operations order, they're going to receive like a warno like maybe like 2 hours out and be like, okay, we're going to conduct an attack at this time. And they'll be like, okay, which units are adjacent, which, who's our supporting unit to our left and right. They don't get any of that information. It's just, all right, when I call you at this time, you're going to attack, or when I call you at this time, you're going to start the artillery barrage. And the communication is pretty good, but they still have that mentality of like, if I give somebody information, like too much information, like an operational order, that it's going to be leaked. Because like I said before, there's such a big insider threat problem that they don't trust anybody, even like subordinate level or adjacent level. And I would say mostly like in their intelligence community, each battalion of like GUR or like the Rozvitka, they're like intelligence units, they don't share information. So that's another huge problem. It's like I was reading The Mission of Men and Me, Pete Blaber, and he's like, one of the things he says, information isn't like real unless it's shared. So that I would always like try to tell that to him and be like, hey man, if you have intel on something, like you need to share it like with your your other battalions or whatever, and they just don't trust anybody. And I understand why, but it's like a huge issue, and they're being spoon-fed like intel, and I can't say exactly what it is, but like they're being, told by UCOM analysts, exactly where everything is, like down to like the, where the radar positions are on the Russian side, but that information isn't always shared with everybody. And the reporting systems don't exist. The reporting infrastructure doesn't exist. It's just like whatever they get at the time. What else?
What can you give us like shit?
I've been talking a lot about it, but the problem is that there's a lot of good things too. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. And that's what I kind of want to extrapolate from this conversation. I just don't want to all be negative stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Mike, what do you guys got?
Well, let's hear some of that good stuff, Logan. I mean, you pointed out some really good problems that they're having, and not unexpected in and of the fact that they come from a Soviet-type background, so it would be hard for them to get out of that paradigm for sure. But the fact that they even still exist during the fight tells me they're doing something good. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think just like the ability of like the basic Ukrainian, like I would say like squad or platoon to like evolve, because like I said, they have all these problems, which forces them to basically like be so good at improvisation that they have their own like TTPs, like at the squad level, like they know all that stuff, and they can like operate without, in the absence of orders, they can operate it's not looked at as like a good thing, but what happens is the guys who are like sitting in the trenches with like limited training, like those aren't the guys I'm talking about. Those are the guys that are going to try to like, they're going to just be placeholders in the trenches, like to hold those defensive positions. But what has happened over the course of probably since 2016 is the veterans of that time at the ATO and same guys who are fighting now, they form like these like really strong, like I would say like company size elements of volunteers that have been fighting since like 2014, even maybe before that. And this includes like the Chechens, Georgians, like people have been fighting the Russians since way before. So like I'm talking like veterans that have been fighting like the Russians since like the 90s. And these guys are like, I don't want to call them like special forces, but they're wrapped up into like their intelligence infrastructure. And they have been so effective in like doing ambushes behind enemy lines operations, even like shoring up like your basic like regular infantry, like militia level infantry. They can be put into those positions, whether they be mechanized or motorized, and they can like really make a big difference on the battlefield for real. And those guys, most of them like come with their own assets, like they have their own drones, they have their own mortar crews, like trained artillery guys. Um, the couple of the companies that I was with, like it's like a mix of like Western and Ukrainian volunteers who have been fighting since, like I said, since probably around 2014. Some of the guys are newer, but a lot of the dudes are really high speed. Um, there's a lot of guys from
So
like
it's
South America as well. Go ahead.
so if I can summarize, if you don't mind, it sounds like what you're saying is like company and below, they've pretty much got their acts squared away.
Oh, of
It's
course,
like
yeah.
the battalions and the brigades that just
hmm
cannot get the coordination.
It's like I don't know how you train because I wanted to go to One Shepherd for a long time, but I would say like it's around the company size training event, correct?
Yeah.
And so once you get above that level, there has to be a lot of like left right unit coordination and in rear operations coordination, especially like logistics and stuff like that. And at the battalion level in the brigade, if there's no like coordination and like overall operational structure to like support those operations, you have a big problem. And even if there's guys that are really competent, uh, whether they be Soviet trained or Western trained, uh, if there's no direct, I would say like I don't want to say like joint forces command or like maybe they would benefit from like maybe even like a divisional level, like expeditionary level, small skeletal crew command structure. It would be good because right now there's a bunch of independent brigades and special brigades that are operating under the auspices of like a northern front, an eastern front, and a southern front. And so when you have like that many brigades, plus I'm talking about like the guys who are on the front, the guys who are in reserves, and then you have all these like little territorial defense units in your sector that are answerable to somebody else. And of course, you have all these volunteer, like I was talking, like these veteran volunteer units that are kind of just pop in whenever they want to or whenever they can. And I think that they would really benefit from some mentorship in that area. But until I worked in some staff headquarters at the corps level, and I think that they could benefit from some of that staff work as far as like coordination, IPB, um, even just like help in mission planning and stuff like that. And they get a little bit of that. I can't go too much into that, of course, like our embassy and other people doing stuff, but it's very limited.
What's your overall sense on like how things are going over there?
Mm, it's worse than what you see on YouTube. Like as far as like even like the guys I trust, like some of the people that I've been watching for a long time, they'll they're a little bit too optimistic, and especially when I was in the southern area in Zaporizhia, it was bad, man. It's just imagine getting a Warno, you know, 30 minutes before your step off time is, and you don't have like enemy numbers, you don't have intel, you don't have any kind of information that would help you in your like own like even like squad level planning process, like for your military decision making process, and like none of that, like you have like literally zero information, and they try to do the best they can. And like I said, like you said, the company level, platoon level, like they're trying their best, but when they're getting contradicting orders and stuff like that, and then they run into minefields, and they've made some successes breaching, but it's just, as you can imagine, just getting hammered by artillery, concentrated artillery fire. You can't make a lot of movement in open terrain like that in the steppe, and they need something. They need something a little more coordinated. The offensive, I think, was supposed to be like more of like a information operation than it was a actual offensive, because like the offensive capability of the army is not anywhere near where it should be, and that's, as we've seen like past 72 hours, there's been a lot of like laws that have come out from the Zelensky government that have been to change like who the mobilization factors are. So like if you have certain diseases now, like it doesn't matter anymore. So like the mobilization is coming. And I, as like an intel guy, like I'll look at other information. If you look at look at the enemy's information, like the propaganda goes both ways, but you can kind of like take the information that you're seeing like pro-Ukrainian media and then like anti-Ukrainian media. Like for instance, like one of the guys that I watch is the Duran. They're like very pro-Russian, like anti-Ukrainian, but the guys are very smart. And so you can take like that their information and like maybe somebody else, and like kind of the information somewhere in the middle, and you can kind of gauge for yourself like where it is actually like in reality, if you're not there, of course.
So Logan, what would you say, like for the average guy sitting back here trying to watch this in the world, which news source would you say is more reliable as for what's actually going on the ground? Like, is like Sky News better than DW News, better than the BBC, better than our news services? Which one do you think is the closest?
I'm kind of biased because like I started learning Ukrainian probably in February, and so like I can read their news now, and that is probably like the best source of news. Like if you want to read about like what's going on, like go to Instagram, go to like a certain the like certain like 24th Brigade, whatever, and they'll have their own like news, like what's going on. You can go to like the National Guard, whatever like social media like Ukrainians have. They have like their own social media people and their own media people that like they give information that's like really good, and some of it you can translate, like you can push a button and translate it. Colonel McGregor, I respect that guy. He's like an innovator. I actually read his books, but he is such a freaking foreign agent, dude. Don't freaking listen to everybody. Don't listen to everything.
Dude, I was gonna ask you about that because I listened to him, and I've seen some videos, some interviews he's done. It just seems like, dude, he paints the worst possible, scenario.
And he's a very smart guy, and like I respect him like as an armor officer, like a maneuver guy. He's amazing and brilliant man. But he is obviously like I'm not saying he's paid by the Russians, but I mean he has some sort of influence on him where he speaks about that, and you can tell, and a lay person can tell without being like an intelligence guy. He has some undue affluence there. Just lives in DC, obviously, but
yeah. So like I was listening to a recent interview he did, and it's like I remember hearing another interview he did prior to that, and it was just like it's doom and gloom all day long on this for the.
And he's been wrong. He's been wrong on a bunch of stuff.
Right, and one of the things he said on this recent interview is like, oh, if the Russians want to steamroll them right now, they could. And I'm like, dude, they tried, and they didn't succeed. Like, and it was terrible. Like, I get, the Russians are, better off than it's being portrayed, but I mean, there's no way they could steamroll Ukraine right now at a drop of a hat, because if they could, they would have already.
Yeah, and that's what the mobilization, the new mobilization, and they're going to keep it quiet, but like the new mobilization for the Ukrainians is going to be probably another 250,000 dudes who are not going to be high quality. They're just going to be like ready for the next. They're worried about like a new offensive that's going to come maybe in the winter, maybe a little after the winter. But
you think the Russians are going to push? Or
oh, of course, yeah. There's no peace plan on the table that's viable, because if there's people saying that the take away Western assistance or whatever, and then there's going to be like a Korean situation, two Korea situation. And I disagree. Like, knowing Ukrainians, no Ukrainian is going to accept that, and no Russian is going to accept that, because the Russians believe they're winning, they really do, and they've used up a lot of the dudes in the LNR and DNR like cannon fodder. Like they did in World War II. They used Ukrainians as cannon fodder in World War II as well. And they've run out of dudes. And they have a lot more, of a population to pull from to create another invasion force, which is totally a total possibility. And that's what the Ukrainian military structure is thinking as well. That there's going to be another invasion force here in the next 6 months ready. And so there's going to be one of two scenarios that we're going to have to either watch the Ukrainians eat, another invasion or another push from maybe Belarus. When I was working there, one of the main things my boss had me looking at was the viability of Wagner training Belarusians or some other guys to come across from Pripyat north of Kiev, like to push from the north to create a second front, or to even push towards Lviv. And ended up being kind of like a unrealistic thing, just because of like the terrain and the intel just wasn't there. I can't go too far into that, but like it's just not like a realistic thing right now. But as far as like indirect operation missiles, artillery, drones, a crap load of that stuff is in Belarus. And just like I was in Kharkiv was the last city that I was in before I headed back. And man, there must have been like an air raid every like 10, 20 minutes. And a lot of that's like, MiG-31 took off from Belarus, and it's got a freaking, cruise missile on the bottom of it, and they know. And they're like, hey, it's coming this way.
What's your take on the whole thing with Wagner when that all went down?
Oh, it's hilarious. I mean, I thought it was hilarious at the time, but I think it is like the same concept, like as far as like when you grind down a unit, like can you imagine like taking like a really significantly trained unit, like let's just say like a Marine battalion or something, and like grinding it down like by attrition to like the best dudes possible, and then like not treating those guys, and it's like the opposite of the Ukrainians. Like those guys get ground down to like a squad from a battalion, and you've seen the way that Ukrainians, like the way they rotate their units out. They do a pretty good job at rotating their units, but the way the Russians rotate their units is they are attrited until they are almost destroyed, and then they just send reinforcements to occupy the positions.
That sounds very Russian-like.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can listen to some of the SIGINT captures. If you go onto like, just go to the Instagram of like SBU, or even like the another good one is like their Defense Intelligence Unit for the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, DIU, and there'll be so many good like SIGINT captures of guys talking about, oh, my unit, we start out with 300 guys and we're down to 10 guys. And those guys, like they stay, like they're not rotated out. And so if you can imagine like this like nexus of dudes that are like angry, and like their morale is so fucking low because they have, they've gone through all this stuff. You can imagine like this from the Russian perspective, those guys are tough, but like you can imagine like the anger and the frustration and everything like coming to like a boiling point, like even like in a normal unit, not even Wagner guys. And to be realistic, like a lot of their best guys like died at the beginning, like all their VDV units, all their like elite unit, mechanized units and stuff like that. A lot of those guys were like totally eliminated like in the very first month. even the Wagner guys, they went over there. A lot of those guys, we thought, man, those guys are gonna like make a big difference, but they die by artillery just as easy as regular, infantrymen. And yeah, I think the as far as like the Wagner situation with Prigozhin and stuff like that, it was just the way their government is structured with the oligarchy and everything. It was something like that was bound to happen. And everybody was joking. It's like it's like the exact plot from Call of Duty of like ultra nationalists fighting Russian nationalists. It's hilarious.
So do you think Prigozhin was on that plane when it got shot down?
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, just think everybody here in the States is just like, dude, that dude's gonna get killed. Like
oh, of course, yeah. I mean, people fall out of windows all the time in Russia.
Right.
Why not fall out of a plane?
So I've been trying to get Tyler Jackson on here, but he's not able to come in at this time. But he did ask you a question. Have you encountered any radio or GPS jamming or spoofing?
Oh, dude. Yeah. It's like just like something that normal Ukrainian person has to deal with all the time, like on a frontline city like Zaporizhia or Kharkiv or Kramatorsk or something like that. Like if you want to use Uber, or in their version is like called Uklon, or like any GPS service, like you're going using directions, or like you're getting an Uber or something, like you can't when the air raid goes off, because both sides are going to kick on their GPS jamming. And yeah, it's annoying. Like I can't go too far into it, but doing like drone training, the guys have to learn how to fly by wire, basically, because when you fly a drone, you can use the GPS to mark positions. You can use your GPS to like realize where you are, in position to where like your operator is or where the target is. And the Ukrainians have had to learn to use like literally no GPS, and to use like a train association and everything else just to get to the target and come back. And the ability to mark is of course hampered by that, but like there's no GPS. Like it is totally gone. And sometimes they can shield certain things like components from that, but it's very difficult.
You bring up an outstanding point, and if you're not taking note of that here as U.S. military or even as an American citizen, that at a time facing against a peer or near peer threat, that GPS is probably not going to be available.
It's gone. And like I tried to like when I was doing, because I did some like they asked me to do some like regular like some basic like battle drill training for some guys in north of Kiev, and man, for them to try to understand like the good old like prone bone, like doing analog like map marking, like mission planning and stuff like that, just like on paper, like they are like, I don't want to say they're resistant to it, but like they are like, man, we have GPS. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't, dude. And some of the guys understand that have been to the front, but a lot of the guys, you can imagine, it's like a 1,000,000-man army, dude. So it's like there's a lot of inexperienced people.
Right.
And they've had to learn a lot of new things. And of course, you got to learn how to do. If anybody wants to go over there, please study up on like your Russian grid reference, Soviet style grid reference systems and like maps and stuff like that, because some of the guys understand MGRS and like NATO maps and stuff like that, but most of them don't. They can't even like comprehend top-down perspective as far as like mapping and like train association and geography and stuff like that. So you like really have to understand like their systems and how you can integrate it with yours, your knowledge, if you want to go over there and be like a volunteer.
Can you speak to some of the like drone countermeasures and things of that nature? Because obviously drones have played a bigger role. It seems from my perspective that the vast majority of them are used for like artillery spotting. But I mean, you've already brought up and mentioned like jamming and stuff. Obviously, that affects the drones to the point to where they got to fly by wire, right? They can't use their GPS and stuff. But what drone countermeasures have came out of this conflict?
I would say, like, I mean, physically, you see a lot of systems now, like your high value systems are going to come with, like they talk about Russians having cope cages, the Ukrainians have them too, dude. They have like whole boxes, they have like a whole box wire frame around their artillery systems, and they're like, like their important positions, like their air defense and their radar stations and stuff like that, they're like very well protected as far as like camouflage and like physical standoff barriers like cages and wire mesh, stuff like that. Um, it's hard to get like the regular infantrymen to understand like the importance of camouflage, even like personal camouflage. Like that was one of the big things I was trying to teach guys when they were doing counter reconnaissance sabotage group like patrols, is to wear camouflage paint, because like that isn't like a Soviet thing or like a Eastern Europe thing.
I've noticed that. I've noticed that.
And like if you go to my Instagram, I'm not trying to like do it because mine is private anyways, but like I have pictures of like the guys training, like I'm like showing them like how to use face paint and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, can you bring us back some loam green paint for our faces and stuff like that? And I was like, yeah, sure, man, but because they don't have stuff like that there.
Yeah, so
Like
I've noticed, you got dudes that are doing. I mean, clearly they're doing some sort of like special operations, behind enemy lines and stuff. Like the video where, I guess they're like Ukrainian Marines and they jump into a trench and they take out several Russians inside that trench. Obviously, it was a Russian trench system, but like you see guys with like scrim in their Kevlars and stuff. So like obviously they're thinking about camouflage, but like none of those dudes have camouflage face paint, and it's like, if you're going to do a special operations behind enemy lines, like you think you would go the extra mile of, camouflaging your face, right?
Yep. And some of the guys, like they give me shit because they're like, dude, why am I camouflaging myself if I'm just gonna put a bright ass blue tape or bright ass yellow tape on my helmet or my uniform or my equipment? And I'm like, there's some moments like when you're staring over the lip of a trench, or you're like looking through a hole in a freaking bunker. Or, I'm just like, hey, would you rather have the split second of an enemy being like, is this a guy or not, or whatever? Like, you want that split second even, especially like when you're in like a close combat situation, like in a trench line or like in a bunker system or something, like, or even in the woods, because a lot of the combat happens in the woods. And do you want your face to be fully exposed with no camouflage and you're like looking around a tree or something like that, or would you like the 1 or 2 seconds of recognition, delay? And some of the guys understand, some of them don't. And it's hard to change a guy's mind. Some of the guys that are fighting over there are like 60 years old, dude. And you're never going to be able to tell them anything. And some of the guys are young and they understand. Some of the guys are young and they don't understand. Just depends. It depends how good of a instructor you are, I think, for them to understand. But
so I'm still trying to understand like why the Russians aren't using their air assets as much. Like what's kind of keeping that at bay, or are they just choosing not to employ, carpet bombing or, things of that nature?
They did. I think they did initially, especially like in places like Mariupol and some of the other places like Izium and stuff like that. They did use a lot of like really area defeating weapon systems, cluster munitions, stuff like that, and they used a lot of incendiary weapons. And if you look at like their air power situation, like they don't have a lot of assets. And a lot of that's like maintenance issues. A lot of it's because they're being attacked at their air bases by indirect fire from the Ukrainians. And what you'll see is most of the time, like I was talking about, like when I was in Kharkiv, like in the front area there, like they'll launch their missiles kind of like the Israelis do. They'll launch their aircraft and fire their munitions from behind terrain, and then they'll pull off with that when they're outside of range of air defense. So basically, they'll launch like a standoff weapon system from like, and especially like the big boys like a Tu-160s or something like that. They'll launch their stuff from like all the way like Lake Baikal or something far away, like really really far away, like thousands of kilometers, so that there's no way that they could risk that the air platform from being shot down by air defense, and they still get the weapons on target. And of course, you could see it coming from further away. But I mean, they are using their air power, but they're not putting it at risk.
And honestly, like right now, I kind of think that, or I kind of feel like that's kind of going to be the, the next fight with us, right? If we end up hooking and jabbing with China, like I don't think either power is going to own the sky because of the anti-aircraft defenses. So
there was one caveat on that. When I was on the southern front, I was back in the second and third line at that time, and the real problem, like the real like heebie-jeebies you get, isn't from like the artillery. It's from their alligators and like their like attack helicopters or whatever. Like they caused a huge fucking problem. Like more like at that time, like more so than like the mines and like the static defenses, because those are pretty good weapon systems in themselves. And when they massed them on the southern front, when they did, it was like almost impossible for a mobile unit to like even activate, because as soon as those heat signatures would go off, the helicopters would be firing missiles into them or shooting them or something. And they caused a huge issue. And even with like the air defenses, like in the zone, I mean, it's harder to hit a helicopter over short distance operations than it is to like to see like a drone or like a fixed wing aircraft come to do close air support or something. And
are they employing like SEAD type tactics? Like, are they suppressing the air defenses and then conducting strikes and then pulling out, or?
Not from what I've seen. From what I've seen, it's been like quick, like almost like they're using like massed attack helicopter squadrons as like almost like a quick reaction force. So as soon as like they get knowledge that the artillery is firing on these positions, like because of course like the Ukrainians are going to fire their artillery first and then soften the positions up, and then they're going to launch their mechanized attack. But as soon as they get that indicator, they're going to launch those rotary wing aircraft, and they're going to cause huge problems. And one of the other things I forgot to say was because of the similarities between like Ukrainian doctrine and Russian doctrine, one of the things I hear all the time is, well, we know exactly what they're going to do and they know exactly what we're going to do, because they know the same tactics, like the same, like if they're seeing like a VMP, they know they're going to fight against this unit. They know exactly what kind of tactics that battalion commander, that battalion tactical group commander is going to do. And then they know the Russians know exactly what the Ukrainians are going to do, and that causes a huge, as far as like stagnation in the combat, because there's no maneuver, and everybody knows what each other's going to do. Even when it comes down to like urban warfare, the way that Ukrainians and Russians conduct urban warfare is like almost exactly the same. And so you'll see, you can go look on video of Ukrainian units fighting Russian units, like in Mariupol or even in like Bakhmut and stuff like that, and you'll see like Stalingrad, like room to room, and nobody's moved. Like they're in the same building fighting, but they're not. Nobody's able to push each other out. And the only time you ever see like guys that are like doing something different, or is you see like some of the companies from like the Foreign Legion, because they're not like stuck to those tactics. And so you see like videos of the Foreign Legion guys, they're like running from, they're like flanking whole like city blocks to come behind positions and stuff like that. And you'll see like, some stuff happening. But as far as like Soviet style doctrine, they both use the same thing.
That's very interesting to me, because like you mentioned earlier, you trained with Ukrainians years ago. And like I know Marines that went over and trained with Ukrainians in joint like operations and stuff. So like I was under the impression that they had adopted a lot of Western tactics and stuff like that. But it sounds like at least since the war has progressed, like there's a lot of sticking to what they know.
Yeah, and like I said, most of it is because you have like that cadre of guys that has, like you said, has had Western training and has had other experiences in like the Quad and places like that. But imagine like going from like our army size, what's our like military strength in like the Marines, like 200 300,000 guys or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like increasing that by like 8 times. And you have to call back, like colonels that are like 50, 60 years old, and then now you have Cold War guys, Marine Cold War officers that never had any combat experience, or something like that. And then you have them commanding whole entire units, brigades and battalions, and there's a problem. You can imagine that problem from that perspective. And that goes across the board: Marines, Army, Air Force. The Air Force I think their Air Force has been kind of like immune to some of the issues because they're just such a smaller force, but like their Marine infantry, their Army ground forces, like they suffer from that lack of coordination at the higher level. I mean, you wanted to talk about corruption too? Like, I don't know how much time you have.
Well, I was just about to say we're at the 2-hour 20-minute mark. It's been incredibly interesting. Maybe we'll have to come. You have to come back on a follow-on stream. But to wrap this up, I guess, can you just from your foxhole, man, looking out, like, can you just kind of give us your thoughts on how you think this all ends?
Oh, I really don't want there to be like a cessation of hostilities, as far as because anything cessation of hostilities will happen on the Russian terms right now. And like I said, I'm biased because I'm obviously pro-Ukrainian, and I'm going to go back there again. I'm not going to say when, but very soon. And I think that there's going to be a lot of problems in the winter. And I think that one of two things is going to happen. Either there's going to be a total cessation of Western support, which isn't really likely, or the Russians are going to keep pushing and keep attriting, and there's only so many mobilizations the Ukrainians can do. And at some point, they're going to have to be shored up by NATO. And I mean, a lot of guys just like me, like, they hope that happens, because I would love to see the 101st come across Romania and freaking sit on Odessa and tell everybody to come on. But that's going to take a lot more coordination, and I don't think State Department has a good hold on what's going on. And I can't really speak about that much, but like, there's a lot of hands-off attitude at the embassies there, both UK and US. And I'm hoping that changes.
Well, it sounds like you just described the onset of World War III.
Dude, I mean, I hope not. I feel like we're already on the way. You know what I mean?
I don't think anybody wins from that. So.
Yeah.
But man, thanks for jumping on tonight, brother. So like we literally started this stream. We had no topic.
Oh, you did?
So we have this like live stream group chat, and I was just like, every time it's like, hey man, what do you guys think? A good topic? And really, it was just just a bunch of random shit, nothing that would last 2 hours. So I was like, fuck it, let's go. We've done it before. Let's go live and
why not? Current events, yeah. And when I come on, like in the comments or something before, like I usually just talk shit. But now, like if you serious, like I'll come back on to talk. I have a lot more stuff, obviously, but if you guys want to talk about Ukraine or something,
you've been great, brother. And I got your email, so next time we're doing anything Ukraine related, I'll be sure to include you in.
Cool, brother. Thanks for the time.
You guys got final thoughts? Logan, you got a final thought?
Thanks for being on board, Logan. This was very informative.
Yeah, if anybody needs if anybody, like, I know there's a lot of political, I guess my final thought is like, don't get trapped in like the two-party politics and be a contrarian about, real or like global conflict that is happening right now. Like, don't be that person that just parrots the contrarian information or contrarian viewpoints just because of a president or not, like you don't like a president or something. Like, I don't give a shit about Biden. I don't give a shit about Trump. I care about like the fact that, people are crying about like sending their tax money, like in old equipment to like Ukraine, But it's like, would you complain if your son was being sent to Ukraine? Like, what would you rather complain about? And that's the difference to me. So if I could give anybody advice, like if you want to support guys that are over there, there's guys that are on social media right now that are asking for money. Like I'm talking like Readiness are like so cheap, like so like they're asking for like a couple of $100 and it'll like make their they supply their unit for like a month with food. And if you get on social media, you can support those guys. Like there's squads, there's like companies that are asking for like just donations. If you have extra equipment that's sitting back home, like if you have something to sit in, like maybe send it to somebody. Just think about it.
You got anything, Mike?
No, not really. Other than thank you for jumping on, and I'd love to see you back. And I think we got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, no problem, man. Just let me know.
Yeah, brother. All right, fellas. It's been a good stream. Appreciate everybody hanging around. Almost 2.5 hours almost. But yeah. All right, guys. See you on the next one.
Have a good one, brother.